Come November, if there was one politician we could get rid of, perhaps the only second to Donald Trump would, of course, be Mitch McConnell, someone who has done more individual damage to our country over the past few years than virtually anyone else in D.C. or outside of it. And so we're going to need the right sort of candidate to take on Mitch McConnell come November. And we have one candidate fighting it out to be the guy who takes on Mitch, who joins us now. This is candidate Mike Breuer. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. This is the first time that we're talking about your race. So for people in our audience who might not be familiar with your background, tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you entered the field of politics.
I was farming. I was farming here in Kentucky for the last 15 years. I'm a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, married to a retired Marine, and we met out in California on active duty and found out that we were both interested in farming, sustainable agriculture. And so we bought a farm here when I retired in 2005. And we've been farming here and kind of minding our own business. But along the line, we did a couple other things. My wife got deployed to Afghanistan. I subsequently went as a defense contractor. Our son went as defense contractor to Afghanistan. So we're 100% on the forever wars. But I was a reporter and then editor of the third oldest newspaper in Kentucky, the Interior Journal, a rural weekly. But we've tried a bunch of stuff here on the farm, and but 10 years ago, we settled on all natural asparagus. And just this last Friday, we delivered our first annual load for the Lexington, Kentucky Farmers Market. So we are in the midst of it here.
So you've said before in appearances that I've seen that you didn't have any sort of lifelong burning desire to enter politics, that you've been in a couple of the other most important fields in service to our country, in the military, in the media as well. So why now? What is it about this particular time that has led you to consider political office?
Well, I think it was the slow realization that Donald Trump is a symptom, and Mitch McConnell and his ilk are the real problem. And they enable Trump. They have got this transactional relationship with him as he gets to do whatever he wants, not held accountable, and they get to get rich and pack the courts, which is their legacy. And so,
oh, sorry,
I'm
continue.
Sorry, go ahead. Well, and watching that and this realization, and as a Kentuckian, and with the election coming up, I looked at people who've run against Mitch McConnell in the past, and we've run nice middle of the road Kentucky politicians at him, and they've run as centrists, kind of Republican lights, and they get creamed every time. And so I looked at my resume as a farmer and as an educator and as a retired combat veteran. And I said, he's never run against anyone like you before. And so I'm running at him as a straight up progressive from the grassroots Kentucky.
So in terms of some of the aspects of your platform, I saw one thing that you're supporting is some form of UBI. That's a policy that obviously Andrew Yang did a great deal of work in helping to popularize, and has now become very common that you're hearing politicians talk about it as, the response to coronavirus continues. What do you think the sort of long-term prospects for UBI coming out of this? Is this going to be something that sort of we dabble in but then move past, or do you think that this will give people a taste of the policy that they might want to see in a recurring way?
Well, I think if we've learned anything to this point from the pandemic is how wrongly emphasized our economic system is. We peg the success of what we judge as the healthy economy on the stock market, and not on the lives of the people who work and the poor and the middle class of this country. And so I see a long-term future for universal basic income, as well as universal health care, because in the last 10 weeks, we've seen how fragile these systems are, and they're not surviving the stress test. So, I was speaking to a group of young Democrats here in Kentucky last Sunday, virtually, of course, and I told them the great tragedy of this pandemic after the loss of life will be if we rush back to the comfort of business as usual. And, we added over 6 million people to the unemployment rolls last week, possibly 6 million families now without health insurance, facing this huge health crisis. We cannot rush back to business as usual in this country.
Yeah, and potentially another 3 to 6 million this week. No reason yet to believe that it won't look that way. Yeah, and so you mentioned meeting virtually. I'm curious. I mean, you're running in a statewide race. How are you adapting to the fact that you can't travel all around knocking on doors?
Well, I have to give all due credit to my campaign team. When Andrew Yang shuttered his presidential campaign, a lot of his national staff came here to work for me in Kentucky, and they have adapted seamlessly to me as the candidate. Of course, there's a lot of work on the back end, but and so we've done all kinds of things. We're facilitating. In fact, tonight I've got a meeting with County Democratic Party that my team is facilitating. The digitally. Every night I do a live stream at 7 o'clock, and we have great guests on. We had Scott Santens come on. We've got Kentucky's own Matt Jones, who's just written a book called Mitch Please. He's going to be on Tuesday night. And I know this isn't big numbers compared to what you guys get, but we get 2,000 people a night watching, which ain't bad. That's for awesome. A guy sitting on his farm. Yeah, it's good. And then the other thing I do is that we just have a bunch of interviews stacked up with, and in Kentucky, rural weekly and rural newspapers and local radio outlets are still very, very popular. And so, my day is stacked up with doing interviews, talking to people on the phone, and of course, getting ready to do our nightly live stream we call Chicken Bristle Live.
That sounds awesome. That sounds actually like a lot of fun, and people could certainly use some fun considering what's going on. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.